Good morning, everyone. Since it's been a little while, so let me share my screen with you. All right. Here we go. All right. So this week, our focus is going to be for our meditation on compassion and empathy. And that is supposed to align with this work that we did with the Hidden Brain podcast over the weekend. So we'll talk about too, why having compassion with others and finding empathy actually has these incredible benefits for us too, right? So to get started, you guys can mute your screen, make sure that you're muted. This is only about a 5-minute meditation. You can put your earbuds in if you want to, turn the lights down, whatever you need to do to kind of get into this mindful space. We'll do this and then we'll come back together for a daily write.
This is a meditation on compassion. When we hear the terrible news all too often about innocent people hurt and killed, we ask ourselves, what can we do? And we feel sad and helpless. As a first step, we can focus on feeling and expressing compassion. As we always do, find a comfortable place to sit or possibly lay down and just begin to gently focus on your breathing. Just breathe naturally and comfortably. You may notice the movement of your diaphragm or your chest. You may also choose to focus on the movement of air in and out of your nostrils. Just pick any one of those points to draw your attention to very gently, continuing to comfortably breathe in and out. And as we begin to relax into this meditation session, I remind you that our topic of focus is compassion. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for others. And as you continue to breathe slowly and naturally, we will especially think about those who are victims of violence. It's hard for us to process or even understand why anyone would do these terrible acts to another human being. But through this meditation, we are trying to find that compassion for all people and ourselves. And as we focus on this, we'll just do a slow count from 5 to 1. Each time drawing focus to your breath, and if you wish, you can just repeat these short phrases after me, either out loud or in your head. 5. Compassion for myself. 4. Compassion for others. 3. Thoughtfulness and understanding. 2. Loving kindness. 1. Compassion for all. And as you just relax, bring your thoughts and attention to those affected by these tragedies or those who continue to be affected And take a few moments just to send kind and loving thoughts to them. And now, just one more time, we'll count slowly, breathing comfortably, and staying focused. We'll go from 5 to 1. Remember to keep your attention on your diaphragm or your chest, or the air in your nostrils. Repeating after me if you wish. 5. Compassion for myself. 4. Compassion for others. 3. Thoughtfulness and understanding. 2. Loving kindness. And 1. Compassion for all. Keep this compassion in your heart as you go throughout your day, and pass that compassion on to others. Allow yourself to stay focused in the present moment and keep a clear head, remembering those lost to tragedies and helping to spread love and kindness everywhere you go. Thank you for being a part of this session today.
All right. Okay, guys. So let's just go directly into our daily write today. And it's a little different than the one that's in your calendar, but if you did the one in your calendar or you're going to do it, that's fine too. It's just looking a little more closely at compassion and empathy. And what I want y'all to do is think about right now who you need to show compassion to the most this week. Okay. A lot of times it's ourselves because we are our hardest critics. You might need to show compassion with your family, your friends, maybe roommates, people in your hall, etc. Your teachers who are working pretty hard right now, your peers, your colleagues, maybe your sorority or fraternity peers, all of those things. So I want you to make some goals about how you might show compassion this week. And I'm going to set our clock for 5 minutes, and then afterward we'll share a little bit. All right, guys, that's the end of our 5 minutes. You can finish up if you haven't already. And if y'all don't mind, let's share a few of these. Would anyone be willing to share?
Sure.
Yeah, Solomon.
For me, I guess I could show more passion towards my parents. I really don't call them much. So one way I can show a little bit more compassion is just call them more frequently.
Yes. I had to make it a goal in college to call. I would use Sundays. Those would be the calling family days, because I started to see that it was affecting my parents in particular. Well, not my dad, but my mom. And anyway, now I still do that. It sort of has become this tradition, and it started in college. So yeah, if you can make a routine to do that, it can help. Make sure you check in. Any others?
My best friend got into a car accident last weekend, and I have to take her to go get surgery today and tomorrow on her wrist. So she's kind of going through it because she doesn't have a car anymore. So she's a little out of it and having to, like, it's her dominant hand. So like typing right now is really hard for her. So she's like freaking out with like work and all that, schoolwork.
Oh my goodness. Well, she's blessed to have you as a friend. But yeah, having to show that extra compassion, you'll have to be doing that the next few days. It's also weird to take care of someone, especially when you're this young. But it's actually such a great practice for a future of having to take care of a lot of folks. All right, anyone else?
I got one, Ms.
Yeah,
Buckley.
Maggie.
Mine's short and simple, but I said I need to show even more compassion than I already am showing to my baby girl Summer. She deserves the world, in my opinion. Just be even more motivating than I already am. Because like Buddha once said, if you light a lamp for someone else, it will also brighten your path.
There you go. Yes, that's it. That segues perfectly into our discussion of this podcast this weekend.
Right?
That's right. Because the idea is not that showing compassion just helps the other person. It actually helps us as well, right? We get these incredible benefits. Well, that is lovely. That Summer is a lucky lady.
She really is. She makes it yeah.
Well, I'm working this week. Y'all know we have a very contentious election next week. I don't know if any of y'all kind of wrote about that, but I'm trying to work hard to push past my judgment of people who might think differently from me, and to consider more like ask questions. So instead of automatically judging, ask questions like, why does that person think this way? What motivates their belief system, right? And then sometimes if you ask those questions, it can lead you to looking things up, like maybe reading a story about this person, or listening to a podcast from the perspective of people who are different from you, etc. So I think going to questions instead of statements almost is a way that we can help to build compassion and empathy with people that we would automatically maybe criticize. Does anyone else want to share? Well, especially if you are writing this week about being more compassionate with yourself, I'll be thinking about you this week, because I think a lot of times the people that we're the hardest on are ourselves, and that negative self-talk can really take over. So if you fall into that category, try to push past that as well, and be more kind and empathetic with yourself and your own faults and flaws, especially as we move here to the end of this semester, which is just crazy to think about. All right, guys, let's start with a couple things. Ms. Black, do you want to update them, or do you have anything to say to them about how Unit 2 grading is going or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm not quite done, but I only have a few left. So if you go and check your grade on Blackboard, it might be there. Overall, they've been good. I've been proud of them. I was gonna say something. Oh, if you look at your grade and you look at my comments and you think that I have graded the wrong version because you emailed me a different version or something got confused, please let me know. I will grade the right one. I'll just grade the right one because I want to grade the one that you intended to be final. However, there were a lot of people who turned it in on Blackboard and then emailed us and were like, hey, wait, actually, here's a different one. So it got a little bit confusing. So I've tried to grade the right one, but if you think that I haven't graded the right one, let me know. And I will send out an email when they're all done. And if at that point I still haven't graded yours, that means that I don't have it on Blackboard. So at that point we can discuss that and figure that out. But if you just turned yours in via email, maybe now is the time to go in and turn it in on Blackboard too. But I don't know if anybody did that for certain, but I'm just letting you know. And also I just wanted to say, if you email me over the weekend, or if you email me like late in the evening, I cannot always reply immediately. So if you have a time sensitive question, please do ask it during the week during business hours. And if you ask like Saturday at 9 p.m., I probably am not going to see it. I probably can't reply. So I just want to make sure that like y'all aren't freaking out with questions that you have that are important, but that you're not getting answered in a timely manner because you've emailed me at a time when I'm not checking my email. So just make sure that if you have a time sensitive question, be thinking of it time sensitively and ask it early. But yes, so I think that's everything for me. But yes, overall I've been pleased with your grades, I've been pleased with your projects, and your grades are reflecting that. Yes, I don't think I've given anything below a B. So.
All right. That's exciting. I know she's going to send me some of the strongest ones too, and so I can check in with those. But I don't know. I think y'all did very well with them. Are there any questions about the Unit 2 project, the reviews? All right. These are some things, if y'all want to take a screenshot of what's up right now, these are some things you'll want to, that I have already checked for, that you are responsible for. So if you have not done these, you still have an opportunity to go back in and do them. If you complete them though late, remember you need to send me an email notification. Otherwise I do not get back into the space to check them. So the Unit 2 reflection, the prompt for that is on the Unit 2 calendar for the last day of the unit. So you can go in and find that. That was done last Monday. Last Monday's homework, which was to explain argument, persuasion, and propaganda to an 8th grader. I loved reading those. There were a couple in there that really nailed what an 8th grader would need to understand this kind of complex group of, or 3 genres, I guess. But you can go back in and do that. The classwork from last Wednesday, which was to analyze the Scott-Simon argument, in the comment section below that video. The homework from last Wednesday, which was to list 4 research questions in the class blog. Guys, what I started to notice is I had to approve all of those comments. So you may not have seen yours come up automatically. The tech guy said that the reason for that is if you ever comment with a bunch of hyperlinks, that it automatically thinks that that's spam, and it makes the admin approve those comments. So anyway, as of this morning, I had approved all of the ones that were listed. For those of you who are really still struggling with a research question that you care about, go in. Your classmates, pretty much each person has listed 4 questions with sources related to those questions. So there is every kind of question in there. I saw business related questions, economics, political, pop culture questions, which I think a lot of those have been influenced by the reviews, which is great. Just all kinds. So if you're still struggling, go in and look at your classmates' questions, and you might end up finding one from there. The argument Ret Lab module was due on Friday at the end of the day, so you still have the opportunity to make that up. And don't forget, just check this week's calendar for this week's homework as well, okay? Which most of this week's homework is centered on just you working through your project, your research journey project. Are there any questions about this? All right. So let's have a quick note on research argument. So what it is and what it isn't. And this came from me looking at y'all's, your 8th grader responses last week. So what does it mean to argue versus to persuade, etc. To show you this, I'm going to go to the Unit 3 calendar real quick. And at the top of the calendar, y'all know how I love epigraphs. This is from a great book, Joseph Harris's Rewriting How to Do Things with Text. And he describes academic argument as a kind of conversation. The goal of such writing is not to have the final word on a subject, to bring the discussion to a close, but to push it forward, to say something new, something that seems to call for further talk or writing. Y'all talk to me about this real quickly. What do you think I'm trying to push that a lot of people were saying to 8th graders? This is what argument is. And it's not necessarily what academic argument is. What's sort of the difference here when you look at this description versus what you think a lot of people wrote last week?
It seems like the point of an argument is not trying to prove that you're right, but to prove something that's factually correct or that can better the world.
That's it. It's exactly it. Last week, a lot of folks were telling 8th graders, when you argue, you prove to the other side that you are right. Okay? Guys, in academic argument, we are not arguing to win. Okay? This is not a debate or anything like that. We are arguing to continue a conversation that has already been started. Okay, so you are not the brand new researcher of your research question. And you are not the first person to look into this, right? You are an academic who is now going to look at what all these other academics are saying, and you are going to contribute your own piece. And then that conversation is going to keep on going with or without you. Does that make sense? Hopefully it will take a lot of the pressure off, you know, as a writer, that you don't have to have all of the right answers, but to find the answers, you have to go to your research, right? Not to just your own brain and what it thinks about the topic. If you were going to your own experiences, that aligns much more closely with persuasion. Okay. Does anyone have questions about that? All right, there is this great, and if we had time, I would read it to you guys, but we don't have time. But there's a great piece that furthers this, and it is under Unit 3 resources in Blackboard. It's called Research as Conversation. So if you're someone who, maybe you took speech and debate in class when you were in high school, and you're like, now wait a minute, I've always been told argument is, you know, arguing to win. If you still have a question about this, look into her essay, which really does a great job of explaining it and kind of breaking down research as sort of this academic conversation. And then that might put some of that pressure off of you to feel like you have all of the right answers, okay? Last week, I also did a quick video using Sarah Tabor, she's in my noon class, using one of her research questions from last week. I just kind of talked about, all right, this is how my research journey went, because I'm scared a lot of you are, maybe you're using kind of limited search terms and you're not pulling back the research that you want. A lot of what I'm suggesting to you is to look at articles that are like hyperlinked in the sources that are very interesting to you. Let you know, hyperlink to those sources. They may have different sources associated with them that you could link into. Sometimes like an NPR article will link to a study or like a journal article, and it'll block you, or it'll say, you know, you have to pay $1.99 for this journal article. Remember, if that happens, you do not have to pay. You've already paid for that in your fees, tuition and fees for our OneSearch, our library database stuff. So all you have to do is like copy and paste that journal article into OneSearch, and you'll be able to access it from there. So make sure you don't pay for any research that you're doing, okay, because you have access to that. But here's the video. It's also on our YouTube channel, so y'all can check it out there. And then I emailed it to y'all on Friday as well, okay? So these are just some little tips based on some things that I'm seeing so far that I want to make sure. Oh, I think it's trying to play. There we go. I want to make sure that we handle before we get started this week. All right, any questions before I start breaking down these assignments? Very good. Okay, let's start with the research journey assignment. So this unit is on academic argumentation, but we have two parts to it. So the first part is what we call the research journey assignment, and it is just a casual conversation about your research journey. Okay, and guys, this thing is going to be graded very easily and simply based on whether or not you have everything from the assignment sheet in your video. Okay, so let me show you this, and if you want to, just follow along with me. To get the copy of this assignment sheet, you go to Blackboard, to Unit 3. At the very top, there are the assignment sheets. We're looking at Part 1, the research journey. So here it is. Let me show full screen here. All right, and by the way, I covered this in detail in the video from last Wednesday. So if left with any confusion after I break it down today, you can go back in and see it in that video as well. But here we have at the top this, I love the epigraph, research is what I'm doing when I don't know what I'm doing. And guys, if we conference this week and you say, I have no idea what I'm doing, my first question to you will be, what have you read? Okay. If you're not sure what you're doing, you go to the readings, you go to the research, you look at articles, you look at maybe even social media, right? Sometimes you can look up some of your favorite researchers on Twitter and kind of follow their tweets, and their tweets are actually really informative. And a lot of times even their tweets will hyperlink to other sources. So there's even ways to use social media as a research technique. So here you guys can read this on your own or listen to the video from last week. It's essentially saying that when we do a research project, the first part of it is sort of this journey where we do lots of reading, we have these questions, it leads us to this or that, and sometimes what we end up writing about is very far from what we started with or that original question. And that's actually a healthy thing. That's based on the research that you're taking in. So your task is to create a project that reflects your research journey on Flipgrid. That's what we're using. I was talking with Solomon earlier. He went in and checked to make sure that he could log into it. I want all of you to do that within the next day or so. Just make sure that you can log in through where it says log in with Google or Microsoft. You guys log in with Google and put in your Go account, your Ole Miss account. So it should allow you to log in. Once you do, you're going to narrate your research journey. Now, it's 10 minutes maximum, okay? But I think I did one as a sample, was about 8 minutes. And then what you're going to do is just make sure you've done all of these things in your recording. Introduce yourself, your research question, and what inspired that research question, okay? And it could be one of the sources that you end up using in your project. Then you're going to discuss 3 sources that answer your research question, okay? And you'll talk about each source a little bit. You might talk about how you found that source, like what you used. You could talk about like a little summary of the source, who the author is, some of that biographical data that helps us understand whether or not that source is credible. and then what you want to use from that source in your paper, potentially. Now, you may not even end up using that source in your paper, but as of now in your journey, what you might use, okay? Y'all look down here, I want to remind you, at least one source needs to be a scholarly source. So that means it's peer reviewed. So that's something like a journal article or a breakdown of a study or something like that, okay? Now, you also are going to look at one roadblock source, and that's kind of looking at an opposing view of what you're writing about. So we want to push back past dichotomies like a pro-con sort of thing. And instead, you might look at, okay, what would an economist say about my research question? Okay, so if you take the Flint water crisis, you might look at what local economists would say about that instead of just looking at it as from like an environmental perspective. You can look at it from a social science perspective, which is kind of like the hidden brain stuff. But basically probing it with different kind of bodies of study and what they would say about your research could just add an interesting nuance to your research, okay? Then you're going to have a working claim. Now that working claim will be what you think your argument claim for your paper is going to be at this point, okay? And then you'll end with, hey, look, I know there's still lots left to do. I'm still interested in finding these kind of sources, right? So this is what we call like a note on these gaps in your research. So what you still have left to look at. So basically, this is an informal conversation among academic peers. Let's talk about that a little bit. What do you think I mean by that? An informal conversation among academic peers. How do y'all think you need to act in this video or talk or whatever? Anyone?
Speaking with familiar terms about your subject?
Yes. Don't feel like you have to be all, like you have to sound smart or, anything like that. You are just leading your audience through your research. This is where I started. This is what I found. And this is where I think I'm going to be going with my paper. Okay, that's it. If you can do those things, then you'll get an A and we will move on to writing this paper. Okay, but it really pushes you into this, gives us a lot of time in this research part of this assignment. Okay. All right. So Flipgrid, I'm just going to kind of show y'all what that looks like real quickly. You can see, I don't know why that's so small. You can see there's one response and it's mine, okay? And I'll just show y'all what it looks like just a minute. Hi, my name is Amber Nichols-Buckley, and this is my research journey project on what are the health benefits of being in nature and how can we make them accessible to all. So I've had and y'all see it's kind of choppy. Y'all will play with Flipgrid a little bit. What it does, it's kind of like Zoom. It lets you record and then you can share screen. That's what I would suggest you do instead of it just being your face. You share your screen and that way you can actually lead us through the different sources that you've compiled. So you see how I have all of them kind of up here in my tabs. You'll want to do that kind of preparation before you start to record, because otherwise you're going to have to stop and start and stop and start multiple times. So I'm just going to kind of lead through here. You see these different sources. While the sources are up, I'm just kind of talking about what I might use from those sources or where these sources came from, how I've kind of tracked my research over time. And then let me show you here towards the end. The working claim. Notice I just have a Word document up. Let me play this real quick. Here to my working claim, which so far is in a world that feels shut in, getting outside can actually be a boon for our mental and physical health. And so here I'm going to talk about the ways in which we benefit from being outside. Now, there is a gap in research that I'd like to look at, and that is one's socioeconomic level. I think I need more information about that. So especially if we're talking about virtual reality as a solution to helping nature become more accessible, what happens if someone's too poor to purchase that kind of equipment? Or okay, so here you're seeing me, I know you're like, wait, virtual reality, what? That was one of my sources, because in my research journey, I ended up finding a source that was like, hey, look, if you have people like in nursing homes who can't get outside, they can get as much benefits from nature if they visualize it through virtual reality, which is really cool. But anyway, I'm looking at those gaps in research, and that's just it, right? It ends with my claim and then what I still need to do to make my research more solid. Y'all, let's get some questions. Any questions about this project?
When you mentioned the part about virtual reality, was that essentially your counterclaim or just an instance of what might
Yeah,
happen if?
that was what do we call it, roadblock source. So looking at it from different perspectives, that's when I was like, okay, well, there are going to be some people who cannot access the outdoors in the same way that I can as like an able-bodied person, right? So I wanted to look at that, you know, what do you do for people who can't access the outdoors? And that's when I came across that virtual reality slide. So again, it's just kind of pushing into some of the counters, the things that you'll hear from people. Sometimes you have to just anticipate that, like you're doing your research and you're like playing devil's advocate. Okay, well, if the outdoors are so great, what about people who can't access it? Especially right now with coronavirus, right? Then how would we address this with that group? So anticipating counterclaims, y'all know one of the best ways to do that is to just talk out your research question and your research with a friend and say, okay, I need you to play devil's advocate. What are the problems you're hearing? And a lot of times they can tell you. All right, any other questions? All right. We're going to come back to Shankar Vedantum's piece. Let's talk real quickly about this week. So there will be no class videos this week on Wednesday or Friday, okay? And because the reason for that is because you guys just need to be working on your research and conferencing with either me or Miss Black or someone from the Writing Center. So everybody now is embedding themselves in their own research project. That is the #1 task. Okay, and that takes time because most of that time is reading, right? So reading your sources, breaking them down, using that handout that's on under Unit 3 where you look at what is the claim, what is the evidence, what are the counters in this source, etc. So really breaking down that argumentation, figuring out what you want to use from those sources. That takes a lot of time. So that's what you're working on this week, okay? You do have a RET-Lab module due at the end of the week on multimodality. What that means is, since this is a different kind of project, right, you're actually sharing your research by having a conversation with us on Flipgrid. This looks at how you do that, how you kind of rethink writing, right? So in this case, writing as conversation. Your research journey projects, we're not going to do a peer review on them because they're an informal conversation, okay? You just want to make sure they have everything that the assignment sheet lays out. Those are going to be due by the time we meet next Monday for Monday session, because part of next Monday session is looking at your classmates' research journey projects. Okay, does anyone have a question? All right.
So,
Oh yeah, go ahead, Solomon.
So for this week, we're not necessarily making said project. We're actually trying to find information towards our project. And for the Flipgrid, we're just telling everyone how we went through the process of finding the information, what the information is, and how will it relate to the subject we're going to write about, correct?
Exactly. Now, You could start your Flipgrid now. I wouldn't though. I wouldn't start your Flipgrid till at least Friday because this week needs to be reading sources. Okay. Otherwise, if you try to start the Flipgrid now, you're going to change it a million times before Friday. Does that make sense? Get the sources, take the notes on the sources, figure out, okay, in my Flipgrid, what do I want to say about each source? Y'all can even, if you want to, type out a script. It doesn't matter. It's an informal conversation, so it's okay if you have little hiccups. But if you know that you'll mess up, frequently, you might type out a little script. But yes, I would let the next week, probably until about Friday, be just compiling research. Okay, reading the research, analyzing it, figuring out what sources you want, and letting that research guide what you actually think about your research question. All right, don't forget about the Ask a Librarian chat feature, the UM Library's homepage. If you're really struggling with just like research terms, if it's during normal office hours, you can actually live chat with a librarian. Like it's up right now. You could do it if you wanted to. Say, I'm writing a paper about this. I'm struggling to find sources. Can you help me? They will help you through the process of like what search terms you want to use, which databases could be helpful for you, etc. And that's just on the library's homepage. It'll say, do you want a live chat? All right, guys, let's have a discussion now on Vedantum's piece. I know we don't have a lot of time, but and I know we only have 3 minutes, but we're going to use these 3 minutes. Let's talk real quickly about ultimately what is Vedantum's claim. Can anybody tell me what was the claim in that podcast? And you don't have to say it word for word. You can just tell us. What's he saying about empathy?
It was kind of tough to pinpoint it, but I came up with how empathy connects to the world and confrontation of the world.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do y'all think that he found that there are benefits to showing empathy?
Yes, along with a lot of negatives.
Yes, there are negatives with empathy. That's right. But him highlighting those negatives, do you think that he's arguing that we should not have empathy?
No.
No, that's what we need to dig into. Okay. So yeah, guys, the claim is ultimately that empathy is beneficial, that it has all of these benefits, including things like reducing our stress. Oh goodness, I had all of them listed here. That makes us less depressed. As adolescents, when we have empathy, we tend to adjust to things like the pressures of peer pressure, middle school issues, all that stuff. We seem to be able to deal with those better. So there's lots of research out there to suggest there are all these benefits of empathy, but that it's actually harder to have empathy than you would think, right? So that's why this was titled the Empathy Gem. Why do you think it's titled the Gem?
Perhaps because it takes work to fully understand empathy or show it.
It does. Like we have to actually build our empathic muscles, right? Now, some of us are naturally, he calls them empaths, right? So we naturally are able to empathize with other people. But for some of us, it is hard to empathize, but it's something, even if it's hard to do, that you can actually build your muscles doing, right? Now he is pulling from authority here. Can anyone tell me who is the main authority for this argument? Did y'all take notes?
Are you referring to Jamil Zaki?
That's it. He's a psychologist at Stanford, right? And the author of The War for Kindness, Building Empathy in a Fractured World. So he is our authority. He's the one that's kind of being pulled into this argument throughout. And he's giving us all of these, basically breaking down all these studies, right? And talking to us about what these benefits of empathy are, how we build them, and then also what some of the dangers of empathy are, which we don't have time to talk about today, but should be in your notes, okay? what I wanted y'all to get from listening to this, because I know we're running out of time, is Shankar Vedantam is not scared to back down from opposing views and counterclaims. In fact, he will often use them to make the argument stronger. And he does that in this podcast when he talks about things like defensive dehumanization, which is where a lot of times we, like medical professionals, lack empathy because they feel like, well, I can't live a normal life if I just feel sad for people all the time. He talks about those, and then he ends with how we can combat these kind of negative aspects of empathy and build these muscles, right, for having stronger empathy as we go forward. It doesn't mean that his argument's perfect, and we don't have time to talk about some of the problems, but when you're looking at it, he has some great writer's moves. Shankar Vedantam does great with starting with pathos, like he gives us the paintball artist, if you remember, and you feel so sad for him. And that's sort of how we move into this argument on empathy. So look at his as like a professional model for argumentation, right? As you guys move into your own argument work this week. I got to shut up. We're out of time. I hope you guys have a great week. We need to conference, especially if you are confused at all, okay? Or if you still don't know what you're writing about. Like if you're in those kind of categories, we need to talk. I have office hours tomorrow from 1 to 3. Ms. Black has them Thursday from 1 to 3. But guys, I can be available to conference pretty much any time during the day, especially this week since we don't have those class videos and you're just working. So all you have to do is email me a time. I'll send you a conference link and we'll do it. Okay. Do y'all have any questions before we leave? All right, if you do, stick around. If not, next Monday when we meet, you should have already posted your Flipgrid. Okay, so make sure that you've done that, and then we will move on and write this paper, get this semester over. All right, y'all have a good day. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Buckley.
you. Thank y'all.
Have a good day.
You too. Let's see. I wonder if we ever had Gus. I don't think I saw Gus.
I never saw Gus.
All right, anyone sticking around? Do y'all have questions? Okay. All right. Well, I hated we didn't get to talk about the podcast.